All right, thank you, Carlos. Again, my name is Maria Polletta. I'm a reporter with the Arizona Republic. I always have to give the disclaimer that I am not here to advocate. I'm here to facilitate. Thank you for having me, and Elissa, Kurt, Nathan, thank you for being here. I wanted to start off, we've heard quite a bit today, whether it is about the Citizens Initiative or the legislative process, different moves that could be made or policies that could be changed in terms of reforming our justice system. I'm curious for each of you what you think is would be the single most effective change that we could make as a state in terms of justice reform, if we were to focus our efforts.
Nate, you can go first.
Okay, sorry, appreciate that. I think there's a lot of talk. The governor is putting a lot of energy into reentry programs to reduce recidivism. That's great, but we're taking 19,000 people a year out of prison. We're not doing anything on the front end. We're still putting 19,000 people a year in prison. So to me, we need to reprioritize. We need to start funding things like treatment. We need to start a holistic process of coordinating probation with the judicial process, with prosecutors, so that there's seamless transfers, so that people can get help before they go into the system. We would save a ton of money if we just put lots of energy into treatment, anger management, whatever it is, things that can stop people and catch people and help them before they go into the system, because no amount of reentry effort is we have too many people coming out to handle that. And if we can stop it on the front end and put our money, instead of putting $1 billion into the Department of Corrections, put $500 million into treatment, I think we'd see a dramatic reduction, and I think we'd have safer communities.
Elissa?
Single thing. I think to echo what's been said here tonight, we have to think about the population. 42,000 people are in Arizona's prisons. And if we don't take significant steps to reduce that population, we're crippling our communities, the state economy, families are impacted. And so I think that the states around the country that have gone through sentencing reform have done so and reduced the crime rate. And I think that Arizona has to recognize, and I think so many people do, everyone that we've heard from tonight, and I think that just echoes the community's viewpoints, that they want to see change. They want an opportunity for people to reduce the current population, and absolutely what Nate has said about we have to stop folks from even getting involved. Other states like Utah and Oklahoma have defelonized drug possession. There's an incredible amount of people who are serving time for simple drug possession in Arizona's prisons. That's not making the community safer, and we're sending them into a system, I think based on the research that we had a couple of years ago, nearly 80% of people in Arizona's prisons need substance abuse treatment, and only 3%, we're sending them to a place where we know the treatment is not available, but expecting somehow for those substance abuse issues to be addressed, and then releasing them into a community that also doesn't have resources. And so I really think that the front end changes are so critical, but also we can't forget about the individuals whose lives are already impacted and taking significant steps to reduce the population.
Right. Kurt?
We have a lot of things we can do, right? As Nate said, there's a lot of focus on the back end. I like to say the back end of people being released from prison. We need to maybe focus a little bit more on the front end, the people going in. When Mr. Rodriguez was up here, I heard him say that he's practiced law for like 25 years here, and it made me think that I've done criminal law here as a practitioner for almost 30. And I realized today that half of that was as a prosecutor. I was a county attorney, did everything from low-level crimes to death penalty cases, a number of them. I was a U.S. attorney, and then I've run a defense practice for about the last 15 years. Then I became a lobbyist. I tell everybody I couldn't get any lower than being a defense lawyer, so I became a lobbyist. But what I think we've lost, amongst many other things in our system, is the ability for lawyers on both sides to be advocates for what is right for their client, what is right for the community or the state or whatever you want to see it. And that's happened because more and more power has been taken by the legislature from the judges and moved to the prosecutors. I was a prosecutor for a long time. Listen, it's nice to have the power, right? I mean, anybody that says it's not wouldn't be telling you the truth. But what we've done now is make the prosecutors often the charger, the judge, the jury, everybody. They determine the result in the case. I think that power needs to go, it shouldn't even be power. The system should go back to the way it was designed, where they have an advocate on this side, an advocate on this side. You go to law school to be an advocate. You want to make an argument. And you make your arguments, you present your best case, and you let the judge make some decisions on what is best in that certain circumstances. We've taken that discretion away from judges. We've taken a lot of it. And I think the pendulum, and I know why, I mean, the years of drugs and the years of violent crime and tough on crime, the pendulum swung too far. That pendulum legislatively needs to go back to the judges and let them make the decision. They're experienced people. They can see the human, because this is a human business. They can see the human in front of them. They can listen to the arguments and make the right call. Will they be right every single time? No, because guess what? They're human too. But we've taken the humanity out of the system by taking that power away from the judges and giving it to one side, and it's become lopsided. So I think that's probably, amongst many things, one of the most important and
We're
biggest.
not going to hold you to the only one
Okay,
reform
good.
from the history.
Somebody next week in the legislature will be like, you said that's the only thing that's important. I'm like,
Thank you. Elissa, I wanted to come back to something you had said because it touched on a question I was going to ask when you mentioned Utah. In terms of other states, because we know not just the public, but also our governor, our legislative leaders are looking at how do we compare? What are other states doing? And others can feel free to join in or jump in. But which states do you think are really handling this issue right? Who's sort of at the forefront at some of these reforms, and what are they doing?
It's a tricky question. I think that different states are doing different pieces of the system, right? There are states that are tackling pretrial and bail reform. There are states that have done comprehensive sentencing reform. Oklahoma, and Mississippi, Louisiana. I think a common thread of what we're seeing in states that are tackling criminal justice head on is really reducing the sentencing population and taking the money saved and reinvesting in the community. We're acknowledging that individuals need resources and need support, and not just for substance abuse issues, for a multitude of issues, and that people exiting prison need support, but take the money that we could save, that Arizona could save on that $1 billion that it spends, and reinvest that into the community. And so I think that you look across, as the video showed, over 30 states have taken significant action. And so I won't pretend to comment on the individual respects. And it is a process. And that's why Arizona is an outlier currently, because it hasn't taken the steps that it needs to start the train, to reduce the population, and to really say that we have an alternative, right? We understand that sometimes individuals commit offenses and things happen, but we actually want to build up our communities. We want our communities to thrive. We want to support families. And the system and what we've allowed to happen impacts everyone. We released a report a couple of years ago that showed that 1 in 2 adults in America has a family member that's impacted by the criminal justice system. We can't ignore this anymore. And so I think that's really important.
Anybody else want to?
Well, I was just going to throw a shout out for Texas. Right on Crime, the organization that I represent, originated in Texas out of a foundation, the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And it's probably been close to 15 years now. Who here thinks Texas is soft on crime? Yeah, exactly, right? Nobody thinks Texas is soft on crime. But they've implemented reforms over the last 15 years that have enabled them, the state of Texas, to close 8 prison facilities, 8. Close them, boop, shuttered them, they're gone, and save billions, like $4 billion, all while reducing the crime rate. Crime didn't go up. Nobody thinks Texas is soft on crime, but they were able to close prisons because they didn't have anybody to put in them, and they've saved a ton of money. So I think Texas is a pretty good example, too.
Did you want to add anything? We can move on if you want.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I mean, I know that, just so you guys know, there is a bill being heard this year to legalize or defelonize marijuana possession. The only reason it's getting a hearing, the only reason the legislators are even considering it is because they know it's going to pass on a voter ballot, and they don't want you guys to have control of how marijuana is legalized. So we're dragging them kicking and screaming. Thank God for people like Representatives Toma and Rodriguez, who are fantastic leaders on this issue, and Representative Blackman. But we are in a state that prides itself. And they talked about the committee heads that are blocking all the legislation. They're proud of the fact that we're backwards on criminal justice. They're proud of the fact, they brag about blocking criminal justice bills. So ways that you can influence is by getting involved and looking at the initiatives. I know AFSC has a huge initiative, and I encourage you to talk to Caroline. Raise your hand, Caroline. I'm sure she'll be happy to talk to you about it. But these are the kind of things, like, find out what's going on and then call your legislators, because you have more power than you know.
I think just to like echo on what Nate said at the end, I think we think of mass incarceration as this huge system, and we talk about the First Step Act and what a significant step that was. But most of the people in this country that are incarcerated are in state systems, and to change that, it really is at the local and state level, and that includes the elections. It includes looking at that, and so I would just encourage people to get involved and to continue to be engaged on this issue, and to ask your elected officials their commitment to criminal justice reform and what they want to do and the vision that they plan to execute if they're in office.
And Nathan, my next question you might have already answered, but you can expand or others can weigh in, because I was going to ask, going back to the situation specifically here in Arizona, what you think is the biggest obstacle currently to achieving meaningful criminal justice reform?
Wow. How much time do we have? No, I think that that we have a great movement going on at the legislature, but we have people in key positions that are blocking things. There is a ton of fear-mongering that goes on. People want the public to be scared because they make money. There are lobbyists up there, not Kurt, not me, not Elissa, that make it nice to keep criminal justice on the back burner. There's a lot that goes into it. I think the other thing is all of us have a problem, I think, and it's something that I've had to learn as a public defender, is we sometimes treat these as policy problems, and we forget the human beings who are affected. I remember when I was in law school and I got really interested in criminal justice, and I worked at the legislature for a semester, and I really loved the policy, and I could look up and say, that's a really bad bill. People are going to go to prison for a long time. But it wasn't until I actually started practicing and had to sit across from a person and say, I know it's not fair that you had a half a gram of meth while you were on probation, so now you have to go to prison 10 to 15 years if we go to trial, or go to prison for 2 years on this plea. And that's when it really hit, that we can have these conversations all day long, but the people who oppose criminal justice legislation do not want us and you all to think of the actual human beings and their families whose lives are. And I remember that the first time I had to sit across from someone, and it just struck me how important it's not just policy, it is people's lives that we're dealing with.
Anybody else? Anybody else in terms of obstacles or challenges in the way right now?
I think Nate said it pretty well. The legislature is an interesting forum.
That was very diplomatic.
Yeah.
I'll name names if you want, Sheila Polk.
And there are a lot of motivations. Sometimes there's motivations for people that vote against criminal justice reform policies that have nothing to do with the criminal justice system. And that's what's so difficult to navigate sometimes, because maybe they're trading their vote because they're the guy they need on the budget, or she's the representative that needs something else. So all these things that you might think have nothing to do with criminal justice that the legislature deals with all the time can have an impact on the policies. So it's a tough, and I've known Nate for the last couple of years from meeting him down at the legislature. It's an interesting place to navigate, and it's difficult. And once you think you have it down, and once you think you know how the people are going to go, it changes on you. So always changing for whatever reason. But I do think, on that negative note, the positive note is I think we're moving forward. Maybe not as fast as what everybody wants, but we're moving forward. I'm working with a representative this year on a bill that I think, knock on wood, is going to get out that nobody would have believed would be on a criminal justice reform bill. And he's a champion of it. So the tide is turning, the atmosphere is turning, the attitude's turning, and I think that's good, and we got to keep plugging away. We got to keep working, and folks that are sitting next to me are down there every day helping. So, I appreciate them.
I think the good thing too is we all talk, we work together, we work with organizations. It has nothing to do with party, conservative or liberal, and I think that's one of the smartest things that we've done is really is formed a lot of alliances, and that's been fantastic.
Thank you. Well, you focused, and rightly so, of course, on the back end or sort of before someone even ends up in prison. But the reality is we do have tens of thousands of people in prison, and most of them will be getting out. The other conversation that has been tricky at the legislature and with the public has to do with the infrastructure that's in place or not in place when those folks get out. So housing, ban the box, employment bills, those sorts of things. It doesn't seem that there's been a lot of, at least bipartisan political will, and sometimes it's difficult to convince the public, when there are other priorities to fund, that that's where the state money should be going. I was hoping some of you could talk a little bit about that and what you think needs to be done to that end once these folks are ready to come home.
I mean, we're spending $1 billion on DOC. So, I mean, if we're going to talk about wasting money or being afraid to invest, if you want a safer community, you do invest on transition. You do invest on making it easier for people to find jobs and housing. You don't dump them in halfway houses where the guy in the next room is smoking meth and they're trying to come off of an addiction that they developed in prison. You don't put them on the streets. So, I mean, to me, it's a farce that we talk about the expense of integrating people back into the community when we spend so much money putting them in cages. And one of the biggest arguments that we have right now at the legislature is like on the earned release bill with the programming. DOC has fought a mandate to have the programming. So DOC doesn't have to provide the programming that people need in order to earn their release. They can't afford it. Again, $1 billion. And there was just an article last week, when they were talking about the cost of like telephone calls, the cost of visitation, all of that is supposed to go towards programming. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was an article that they rated that fund to fix the broken doors and locks, which need to be fixed. But come on, like, you do have the money. You're basically running, for lack of a better word, a shit show with $1 billion. Like, so the money is there. We're just not using it right. Sorry.
I would agree with what Nate said, absolutely. And also, Arizona is a state that doesn't have any mechanism for people to clear their record or to expunge their record when they are released. And so you have individuals who have done 85% of their time because that's what Arizona requires of them. They're released and they're doing everything they can to find a job, find housing. But those essential tasks are made so much more difficult by that felony conviction. And and it's not that there's states where if you serve the time, if you've completed your sentence, there should be a road back to that felony being gone. I think that we have to acknowledge and make people who are exiting prison feel welcome back into their communities and acknowledge their humanity and the experiences they've had, and that they are working so hard and there are so many obstacles facing them that we should be committed to making the system more fair and more just when they re-enter society and not stacking the obstacles higher and higher at everywhere they turn.
I think reentry is a huge issue right now because, as everybody on this panel I'm sure knows, and probably everybody out here, the 2 top reasons that folks recidivate is because they can't get a job and they can't live anywhere. They don't have any place to live. We heard Jeff Taylor talking about the difficulty he had. Representative Toma talked about clean slate legislation. It's not going to happen this year, but he's hoping. It's tough in Arizona because what? It's an interesting place, the legislature. So what I like to do, and what I think we should continue to strive to do, is find different ways to do the same thing. Maybe not call it the same thing. Maybe not do as much as what a clean slate would do, but maybe something. Representative Brett Roberts this year is running a bill called HB 2402. It allows people to set aside and vacate their conviction, but along with that, get what they call a certificate of second chance. Now, that certificate of second chance isn't going to clean somebody's record. It's not going to make it disappear or anything, but it's something. And what it does, we look at the other people who might need those folks, employers. What it does is it reduces liability for employers that take a chance on somebody in hiring a felon. It pretty much erases liability for apartment complexes and landlords who give housing to these people. One of the biggest reasons they don't, I've had landlords tell me, they're like, I can't afford my insurance rates if I rent to a felon. Well, we're working the other way, trying to get rid of that. And what else it does is it eliminates the disabilities under Title 32. What Title 32 is our occupational licenses. Contractors, cosmetologists, I don't know. I mean, whoever needs a license in the state, they get it under Title 32. If you have a felony, you're usually disqualified. Well, if you have a certificate of second chance, you're not. Made it out of the House unanimously last week. Moving on to the Senate, where I think it's going to run into some opposition. And we're going to work real hard. But doesn't clean slates, doesn't get rid of everything, but does a little bit and gives maybe people in the community incentives to give these folks a chance and get them back on their feet.
And that clean slate bill will come back next year when we have new leadership too.
I know we are running out of time, but since there were so many elements and questions I didn't get to, I did want to open it up in case there was anything else that you wanted to mention before we wrap up.
You got 3 lawyers up here and you can't get a word in edgewise.
I would just encourage people to really be involved, to check what's going on at the legislature, to follow people like Representatives Rodriguez, Toma, Blackman. They use their social media. They keep people updated on what's going on at the legislature. Find out who your legislator is. Let them know that these are important issues to you. And I know many of you are here because you already are doing that. But get other people involved, your neighbors, your friends, because the way that we do it is, I mean, we can talk all night long, but it really is, I don't live in Phoenix, so they're not going to listen to me. And my representatives are already pretty cool about this stuff. So, but I mean, really, it's got to come like from people being engaged, knowing what's going on. The county attorney race, as was mentioned earlier, is the most important race in Arizona to me, in every county. You guys are going to have a new county attorney. It shouldn't just be a rubber stamp because the Board of Supervisors picked somebody that had a political favor to hand out. And then you just say, oh, well, she's already the county attorney. Look at her policies. Look at the fact that she voted or she signed in supporting the ban on sanctuary cities, even though it ended up dying. Look at those kind of things when you're voting. Who's saying what? And even more important, the next race is more important. Did that person do everything they were going to do? If you want to change the criminal justice system, pay attention to those kind of races and get involved in them as quickly and as actively as you can.
I think that just to piggyback on the county attorney race, one of the things that I don't think I fully appreciated until I started working in Arizona is how significant Maricopa County is, because of, the prison admissions. I think about 60% of prison admissions come from Maricopa County, and so uniquely in Arizona, obviously fixing Maricopa County does not fix the state, but I would encourage those of you all who live in Maricopa County to engage in your local officials, your legislature, county attorney, as well as in other parts of the state, and to encourage folks that may not understand, right? You all are here tonight because you're interested in criminal justice, and to have these conversations with your family and friends outside of spaces that are already of like minds, right? It's important to preach to the choir, but sometimes recruit a friend, bring them next week to the service, right? So I just would ask that you continue to have these conversations. There's so many resources in the state. I want to thank Arizona Talks for putting together an event that had so many voices of different organizations, and I hope that you all will connect on social media. 4.US is doing work here, ACLU, Right on Crime, and there is no shortage of information and of people who want to connect and so proud of the work that organizations are doing with directly impacted people, because that is right. We're talking about people here. We're talking about lives and the effect that this system has on them, and we have to always come back to that, because I think that is what's going to keep us working until we get the reform that I know so many of us here tonight want to see.
Oh, real quick, just a shameless plug. If you are an attorney here or a law student here, there is an organization called Arizona Attorneys for Criminal Justice. I'm the legislative chair of that. We work our tails off at the legislature, and if you would like to get involved, please ask me, I'll help you.
You know, I can't say it any better than everybody has all night, so I don't really have too much more to say. You can quote that for a lawyer saying that as well. I do want to thank Arizona Talks. I thought this was fantastic. I mean, you listen to folks like Khalil and Jeff Taylor up here. They're inspiring because you can overcome. You look at everybody that's involved. We have ASU involved here with Professor Luna talking about it. We have Pima County Public Defenders. We have former prosecutors. We can move this train in the right direction if we keep working together, keep recognizing what other people's views are. You might not agree with my views. Well, maybe I am a jerk, I was going to say, but it doesn't mean I'm a jerk, right? But there's probably a reason for it. Let's talk about that. Let's get there. And I think if we're all behind the train, it's going to start going down the tracks, hopefully faster.
Thank you to all of you for sharing your thoughts. I'm going to add one more shameless plug because your local journalists at azcentral.com are sitting in those 7-hour legislative hearings, so you don't have to. So we are all on Twitter. We are putting out articles that summarize what's going on, what's coming up, and we typically include shortcuts and links to contact your lawmakers directly and to weigh in. So keep an eye on us as well. Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Carlos Alfaro from Arizona Talks, and if you like conversations like these, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and at our website at arizonatalks.org.